Hola, SAP developers. Welcome to the first session, part of the TOEFL 2024 integration track. Today is all about open source projects that different community members have built around SAP Integration Suite. Before we start, please feel free to drop us your questions on the chat window as we will be monitoring it, and we might answer some questions there, but we're going to leave most questions for the Q&A at the end of the session. So this will be an exciting session where we will learn about FlashPipe. Today, we have Eng Sui, who is the creator of FlashPipe, and he will share with us how we can use it to solve our CI/CD needs with SAP Integration Suite. Without any further delay, hola, Eng Sui, over to you.
Hola, Antonio. Thank you very much again for the privilege to kick off this year's integration track for Devtoberfest. It's such a exciting times that we have right now, and I'm very pleased to be able to share about FlashPipe, your CI/CD companion for SAP Integration Suite. Again, my name is Eng Sui. I'm a freelance consultant working under my own company, Equalize IT. So thanks again, and thank you. Welcome to everyone who's joining us today and those who will be watching later. So just to start off, I'll just briefly go through the agenda for today. For the session today, I'll just briefly start off about myself, some profile about myself. Then we'll go through the details of FlashPipe. I'll do some introduction and give you an idea what FlashPipe is all about. And of course, there'll always be an exciting demo session towards the middle of the presentation where I'll show you how FlashPipe is being used with a simple scenario and some use cases. And of course, there'll be plenty of time for question and answers towards the end of the session. But like Antonio said, you can log it in while you're watching, and then towards the end, I'll try to answer as much as possible wherever I can. Thank you again, and then let's kick this off. So to start this off, I have a quote that's coming up. Oh, sorry, I forgot about that. It's not about the quote, it's about me first. So I've been integrating SAP solutions since 2005. And in the last few years, I've written a book, SAP Press book, called Developing Groovy Scripts for SAP Cloud Platform Integration, together with Vadim Klimov, who's my co-author. And I've been writing open source solutions for SAP integration for at least like the last 10 years or so. There have been a few around that you can see on my GitHub profile. You can find them there. Of course, today I'll be focusing on one of them, which is FlashPipe, which is my most recent open source solution. And if you've been looking for articles around, you probably see some of those that I've written because I've been blogging since 2014. Initially, I started blogging on the SAP community platform, but my latest articles, you can find them on my own website at equalizeit.com. So I jumped ahead just now. So now we start with the quote. Amazon, I know Amazon has had a lot of flack recently for their RTO policies, but let's shift focus and look at it from a technical perspective. Amazon, they deploy code production every, what do you think? 11.6 seconds. So that's how frequent changes on Amazon systems go into production. And this is actually from a video by John Jenkins, an Amazon employee back in 2011. Imagine 13 years ago, Amazon was already achieving this type of automation where they could deploy code at mass and at a very frequent pace. So The background to all this is what we call CI/CD. The long phrase for it is continuous integration and continuous delivery or deployment. So to be able to do rapid deployment of software, automation, because if you are doing it manually, you won't be able to achieve this type of speed and pace. So that's where CI/CD comes into the picture. Continuous integration CI and continuous delivery or continuous deployment CD. This is what enables automation of the building, testing, and deployment of software. As you can see in the graphic on the right-hand side, it's a cycle of building, testing, and releasing, and then it's a continuous cycle. These days, CI/CD capability is a must-have for IT organizations across all industries. They want it, they need it. So before we move on to FlashPipe, we're just going to quickly look at a typical build to deploy process for SAP Integration Suite. So the build to deploy process of software in general in the SAP ecosystem actually consists of many manual and time-consuming steps. So we look at, for example, building integration flow in the cloud integration capability of SAP Integration Suite. In the build phase, you start off by using the web UI on a browser to develop an integration flow. Optionally, if you have some logic you need to develop in scripts, an example would be Groovy script. Otherwise, JavaScript is possible as well. You may develop it using the UI browser UI, or you could actually develop it externally in an IDE. Like I do, I use IntelliJ IDEA to develop the Groovy scripts. Once you have done this, you have done the development, then you want to deploy the design time artifact to the runtime. This is a manual step that you have to click on the UI to do that. Now, once that's deployed, you need to test it. Again, testing is a manual step. You test it using external tools. You could have Postman, popular ones like Postman and SOAP UI, or you could actually test it with the third-party this system that it is integrating with. The deploy step. Once you finish testing, then you're ready to deploy. From your development system, you need to move it to the production system, or maybe the QA system in intermediate QA system. You need to do an manual export or manual transport of the design time artifact, and then you need to manually import it into the target system. Let's, for example, take the production system. And lastly, once the design time artifact is in the production system, you might want to configure some environment-specific variables, environment-specific parameters like URLs, credentials, and all. Again, this is a manual step. And then finally, you deploy it to the runtime. So you see highlighted in orange, many manual steps involved in the build to deploy process while you're doing your development on the SAP Integration Suite. So now I'll go to introduce FlashPipe to you. What is FlashPipe? So it is a fully functional CLI command line interface that is containerized in a public Docker image. So the link for the Docker image is there. It's available on Docker Hub as a public Docker image. And this provides CI/CD capabilities for SAP Integration Suite. It's very tailored, specific for SAP Integration Suite. Now, there are at least two ways you can execute FlashPipe. One is very common is using a CI/CD platform, configuring it in a pipeline step. So you could be using it on GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps. You can actually also locally execute FlashPipe on your local laptop or desktop, and then using the Docker capability that you have on your own system. One key thing is FlashPipe is open source solution. So it is under Apache license version 2.0. So that means it's free to use. You have also ability to view the source code that that backs that is the core of the solution, and that is available in my GitHub repository link shown here. So you can check it out, you can fork it, you can make modifications to it, you can just use it as is. That's totally free under the Apache license. So I'm going to next move on to some facts about FlashPipe, just to see some details. So it was first released in May 2021. So it's about just over 3 years old right now since I first released it. So over the years, I've made 34 official releases of FlashPipe. So currently, the version is at 3.4.0. As I mentioned, FlashPipe is on Docker. It's a public Docker image. So execution of it involves pulling an image from Docker Hub. In the pipeline, you'll pull it and then you'll run it. So there have been 45,000 Docker Hub pulls of FlashPipe since its first release over 3 years ago. So some of the popular CI/CD platforms that FlashPipe is executed on are GitHub Actions, Azure DevOps, and also Bitbucket. So these are some of the popular ones. And if you are using FlashPipe on GitHub Actions, there's also a companion action that allows you to configure the CI/CD pipeline in an easier manner. So I'm going to just also share some background about FlashPipe, how it was built, and what are the key technologies around that. The first of all is the Go programming language. Some history for FlashPipe. So right now, I mentioned the version is 3.4.0. Previously in version 1 and version 2, it was implemented in Java, Groovy, and Bash scripts. And since version 3.0.0, it was totally rewritten in Go. And then, so one of the powerful features of Go is this Cobra library, another open source Go library, and that allows me to build a fully functional CLI for FlashPipe. Another benefit of Go is its cross-platform compilation. So you can actually compile it. You can, if you want to make some modifications yourself, you can actually compile it for a platform that's suitable for you to use it. You can compile it to Mac OS. You can compile it into Windows or Linux. So that's the cross-compilation capability of Go. As I've already mentioned, the second part, the second key technology of FlashPipe is Docker. So Docker provides a containerized Linux Debian environment, and which is having a very small footprint, so that it's quick to pull off the Docker Hub. So this container image provides a stable environment with everything that is needed to run FlashPipe. And lastly, Git is a core element of FlashPipe. It is used to store the content of the artifacts that are from SAP Integration Suite tenant. They are transferred to Git as raw files, and then this allows you to have a bi-directional transfer between a tenant and a Git repository. So we have given a bit of facts about FlashPipe, some technologies around FlashPipe. Now, more importantly, right, what can FlashPipe do? So one of the key features of FlashPipe is it can sync artifacts between an SAP Integration Suite tenant and a Git repository. So built in, it is a capability to automatically compare the content between the source and the target before overwriting the target. So it could be either direction from the tenant to the repository or the other way around, from the repository to the tenant. So another capability of FlashPipe, it allows you to deploy artifacts to the runtime, from the design time to the runtime, and then check is the status of the deployment and report it, whether it's been successful or it has some errors or failures. So as I mentioned, when you want to move between different tenants, you might have different environment values, like security credentials, like URLs and all those. So you can configure different files that have different values and then supply them to FlashPipe so that it can sync the correct configuration value when it goes to a specific environment. So FlashPipe supports a multitude of SAP Integration Suite artifacts. So in the cloud integration capability, it supports integration flow, message mapping, value mapping, and script collection. For the API management capability, it supports API proxy and any dependent objects of the proxy. For example, key value maps or API providers that are used for the API proxy. So the support for these are backed by SAP's public API for the integration suite. So as and when SAP extends this, then this is possible to support further artifacts in FlashPipe. So like I know for cloud integration, there are other artifacts right now that are available, but they are the current support is only for this because that's the one that's available in SAP's public API. One nice feature for FlashPipe that's provided by a community member is the ability to snapshot the entire tenant. All the editable artifacts in the tenant can be snapshot from the tenant to the Git repository. So this is quite handy for backing up all the custom development in a tenant. So we'll look at some example FlashPipe commands. So as I mentioned, the CLI is powered by the Cobra library, and Cobra powers a lot of different CLIs. They are popular like Kubernetes, like GitHub CLI and all. And it provides an intuitive command-based approach for executing tasks. So in the image you see on the right is a usage image when running FlashPipe, and you can see how you run FlashPipe. You FlashPipe and then provide the command, and these are the available commands that I talked about: deploy, snapshot, sync, and update, and also the flags that are available for the commands are also listed so that you have an idea what each command is about. So we just quickly run through the commands for FlashPipe. So update artifact is for updating a single CPI design time artifact. Update package is for updating CPI integration package. Deploy, you can deploy one or multiple artifacts to the runtime and report its status. Sync allows you to, instead of one artifact, allows you to transfer multiple artifacts between the tenant and repository, and you can specify the direction, whether it's tenant to repository or the other way around. And sync upim then is taking care of the transfer of multiple API proxies between tenant and repository dependent on the direction. And as I mentioned earlier, snapshot, you can snapshot all the editable packages from a tenant to the repository. So now we've just given a brief intro into FlashPipe, what it can do, what it's all about. I'm going to run through a live demo for you, and we'll look at how FlashPipe is used in action, an actual use case. I will briefly go through what we're going to achieve for this demo. To start off, I'm going to start by creating a new integration flow in the tenant. It's just going to have a dummy GUI scripts inside. The intention is then to develop this script locally. And to do that, I will sync the integration flow to a local Git repository. And this is by using FlashPipe. The first one way of using it is by executing it using a CLI on Docker on my local machine. Then once it's synced to the local repository, I can then use IntelliJ IDEA. I'm going to develop the script and then add some unit tests for the script. And then once I'm happy, I will show you how to use the other way FlashPipe is going to be used in a CI/CD pipeline on GitHub Actions to then update back the integration flow to the tenant and then deploy it into the runtime. So I'm going to switch to my my Integration Suite tenant. So going to my design time, I have already empty package here. So create a new integration flow. So I'm gonna just have a very simple one for the sake of time. I can't go into too complex development. Just provide an endpoint and then add a GUI script called transformation. And then create I'm gonna accept the dummy template GUI script inside here. Initial version. So that's it. So I have a like skeleton development here to start working with. Now we're going to see how we want to use FlashPipe using the CLI version. I have Docker desktop running on my machine, and then I have existing Git repository on my local machine. So to be able to use FlashPipe, I have pre-configured a YAML file. This is one way to provide configuration values to FlashPipe by providing the host details and the credentials to access them. For example, I'm using OAuth in this case. So I have this already pre-configured. You can also execute FlashPipe by providing these details in the command line, but this provides me a quicker way for the sake of the demo today. So with this pre-configured, now I can actually run my Docker image. So I'm gonna just copy this command again for the sake of the demo. I'm just gonna explain to you what it is. So I'm going to use Docker to run an image, and the image is from Docker Hub Inc FlashPipe version 3.4.0. And with the image, I'm going to map the local Git directory on my laptop to a internal work area on the image. So I'm gonna execute this. And you'll start checking, okay, it doesn't have the image locally and it's starting to pull it off Docker Hub. Yes. And then once it's pulled off Docker Hub, now we are actually running inside the image. I'm going to CD to this work area. And then over here is now where I will start executing FlashPipe. Before that, I'm just going to show you, if you just type FlashPipe, you can see the usage details, and then you can execute for each command. You can do a --help, and then you can get further details about each command. And now we're going to use the sync command to sync the design artifact from the tenant to the Git repository. I'm going to copy this command so that I can execute it quickly. So this command is I'm running FlashPipe sync. I'm passing the YAML file that is here, so it knows the credentials to access the tenant and which tenant is from. And let's say I'm going to pass in the package ID, FlashPipe demo, and then to sync it to the local current directory, which is the Git repository directory. And the last fact is to also download the integration package details. So this is how I run FlashPipe sync. And then now that's executed, you see how fast that is, and you can see from the log, it says executing the sync command. Then it get the details of the integration package, and then it saves the package details in Git. And then it starts to look for the artifacts in the integration package, the integration flows, the message mappings, script collections, and value mappings. In our case, there's only one integration flow and no other artifacts. So it's called demo flow. It starts to extract the demo flow and then tries to compare, is there a local version? There's none, does not exist. So it's going to just add it as it is. And then it does a commit into the Git repository, and these are the files that have been downloaded. So if I go back to my directory, I can see over here. So you can see the unpacked integration flow and all. So the next step is I want to develop this GUI script locally in IntelliJ IDEA. So I have IntelliJ IDEA here. I am going to open this Git repository. So you see the similar structure. And in order to develop this locally, I want to make it into a Maven repository so that it knows the libraries that are required for developing and building the Groovy script. So to do that, I am going to just copy some files that I've already pre-prepared, the Maven files. So this is a Maven POM file for the root directory. It provides me with the JDK I'm using, the Groovy version that is used on SAP Cloud Integration. I'm going to use Spock for my unit test later, so I'm choosing the Spock compatible version. And then also, since Cloud Integration it runs on Camel, so I use the corresponding Camel version here. So this form gives me all those details. I'm going to copy another POM, which is for the artifact itself. So the earlier POM is the main parent POM, and this one just says this is an artifact under the parent POM. So when I have these two in, I can refresh and it loads the Maven project. Okay, that's loaded. And then now when I open my script, it has a nice syntax coloring, and it knows what it is. Before I do that, there's another part I need to just ensure that it's using the correct JDK 1.8 because that's what is used on Cloud Integration. Now this is the script that I am going to develop. First of all, it doesn't have a nice name. I'm going to rename that to XML transformation. Okay, then I'm going to copy that name. Now, when I rename this, I need to make sure the reference to it is also updated. So in the integration flow file, I change it from script1 to XML transformation Groovy. So it links correctly. Now I want to develop this, and for the sake of the demo, I already have a script in place. I'm going to just copy this over, and I won't go through this. This is just an example of a transformation from one XML format to another. So it reads the source XML format and then it builds the target XML format. This code is off one of my articles on my blog. So if you're interested, you can look into it further. But just to show you that the development is done here, and then before I load it back to the tenant, I want to be able to quickly test and unit test this. And to do this, I'm going to use Spock. And before that, I'm going to create some further directories for testing. I'm going to provide 2 input files. Yeah. So there's input 1 and input 2 to my test, which I will show in a bit. And then I'm going to create a test Groovy directory where I have a Spock specification. This is the Spock specification where the scenario 1, it will execute the Groovy script, and then it will check the output, and then scenario 2, accordingly, it will execute the Groovy script and check the output. So now I have also a unit test in place. What I can do is I will run Maven clean test. and this builds the Maven project and then runs the transformation. As you can see here, it runs the transformation. There are 2 tests inside and they are successful. So I'm happy with both my transformation and my unit test. So I can now check in, commit the changes that I have. Say, okay, so updated map transformation logic and added unit test. So I'm going to commit this locally first. So now I have completed my off-line development. In order to transfer it back to the tenant, I want to configure a CI/CD pipeline, and that's where FlashPipe will be used to transfer it back. So for this case, I'm going to use GitHub Actions. And then to create that, I'm going to create a directory for the workflow. Again, I have pre-prepared a sample workflow, which I will run through. So this is a GitHub action workflow file, which defines the CI/CD pipeline. It has a name and it is executed when there's a push on this branch, which I'm using. There are 3 jobs in this pipeline. The first job is to execute a unit test, similar to what I've done, running a Maven clean test command using Java 8. And if the unit test is successful, then it will execute a sync using FlashPipe. So you see it's using the latest image of FlashPipe and using the sync command. As I mentioned, it is using GitHub action, so it has a companion action which allows you to easily use the sync command, providing the details of the host, the tenant, the credentials, and then which target it is syncing to the tenant and is syncing to this package ID. So for the secret ID, these are configured on the GitHub repository so that it's masked. So I can show the GitHub repository. So this is configured here. So you have the secret details there, so that it's not located in the file on the repository. Once you finish syncing, that means uploading it to the tenant, then you can then deploy it to the runtime. So this is the runtime deployment, and it deploys this artifact. So I'm going to now commit this as well at CI/CD pipeline. So I'm going to commit and push the whole thing to so now this is pushed to the remote repository, and immediately you can see a workflow is triggered. As mentioned, there are 3 jobs in the workflow: unit test, sync, and deploy. So so this takes a while. I'm just gonna wait for it for a bit. Okay, yes. So you see the unit test, it has executed on the CI/CD platform with 2 tests, and then now it's running a sync. You can see it's running FlashPipe sync, and then it compares. There are differences in the content between source and target, and then it updates the design time artifact. And lastly is deploying it to the runtime and checks that where is it? Yeah, so the artifact previously not deployed, so it's proceeding to deploy the artifact. And it waits a bit for that. I can meantime go to the tenant and have a look. Oh, it's actually finished deploying, so the status should be updated soon. Yep, you can see it's updated. Deployment completed successfully, and you have the deployed version. Of course, we can confirm that I'm not lying here. You can go into the flow and then actually see. You see, this is the script that we have done offline with this content. So that's it for the demo. I've shown the two different ways to use FlashPipe. And now we go back to the presentation. And of course, the next part, as I mentioned, we have question and answers. So maybe Antonio, I think we are ready.
Yes.
We have some time for question and answers.
Excellent. Thank you very much for showing us what a FlashPipe is. I've kept an eye on the YouTube chat, and unfortunately, there are no questions, which I'm very surprised. But that being said, I do have questions. So, if you don't mind, I will just go ahead and ask them. So I noticed that obviously there are many parts to this, right? So I was wondering, so for example, in your opinion, if you are an integration developer, for example, someone coming from that PIPO background, moving to cloud integration, has started, like, for example, playing around with cloud integration. Well, maybe he's familiar with cloud integration as well. He's heard, for example, maybe this concept of continuous integration, continuous delivery, deployment. What are the sort of technologies that you see that they need to be comfortable with, or they need to start learning before they go and adopt something like FlashPipe, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? Because from a PIPO perspective, things are done very differently. Like I said, even in the PIPO, there's a lot of manual steps. You think of transport, and also it's a different kind of it's a paradigm shift. And actually, a lot of this comes from a lot of things that's happened in the non-SAP world, non-SAP IT world, and all those. So CI/CD and all, where it's really popular. So like say some of the technologies like what I show if they want to do some development of Groovy offline and learning something like Maven is useful so that you know how libraries are linked to a repository so that you can compile them and execute them during runtime. So normally in PIPO days, everything is on the server, so you're not doing anything locally. So you have everything in place. But if you start thinking of doing things locally, then there are a lot of all these different concepts like having Maven, and of course Git is also a big thing in PIPO. We don't have the concept of Git, so learning about Git repositories, how it stores the content, and how you do a commit. Commit is basically saving a current snapshot of the repository, how then you can revert between the different history in the commit. Different commit in the Git history. And also, so these are some of the basics that that a developer could look at as they learn how to develop differently, maybe more productively as they continue to go down this path.
Yeah, I agree. There are lots of technologies involved, and you definitely need to get familiar with because it's not just a matter of running commands. It's a matter of understanding what you're doing, right? But it's quite powerful. Like in the end, I really like the fact that you can bring the deployment sorry, the development locally, right? And develop your Groovy script there and running the tests. Like in the end, the test locally they end up giving you the same results as when you were in the cloud, right? At least
Yeah.
in the GitHub action when you show that, which is great. Like in the end, you know that what you're doing it right, right? Now, I mentioned before that there were no questions, but now there are a ton of questions. So,
Oh.
which is great. So let's get started. So the first question here we have from Roy. He says, can we also use it for syncing packages internally in the same tenant? So because he says that they have a use case for an underscore dev underscore QAS packages inside the same tenant. That might not be the best practice, having a single tenant running sort of dev and QA, but there are customers that end up doing that, right? So what's your opinion on that on syncing packages internally in the
Yes.
same tenant?
Yes, that's definitely possible. Actually, that was a use case that one of the projects that I was running on for 3 years, and all they have a single tenant with separate environments. So they have one non-production tenant with three environments, and then one production tenant, of course, for production. And we had to sync and all. So you can use that. And in my example, which there's a link coming up later where it shows that use case, deploying it on the same tenant. So you just have to have, like you said, a different package. So one is maybe a development A underscore dev, and then development A underscore uh, QAS, and then you can configure the pipeline accordingly to do that. And of course, if you're interested, I mean, you can't figure it out, you can always post an issue on the GitHub. On the GitHub repository, I'm happy to just help anyone through that.
Cool, excellent. And I actually shared the link to the GitHub repo, so that would be a great way to sort of communicate, right, with Suite. Now,
Yeah.
I have another question here from Daniel. Daniel, so he asked, do you create a Git repository per package or per iFlow? What would be your recommendation there?
I would recommend not iFlow because that's too granular. Um,
Mhm.
it could be per package, or it could be also a bit higher, but definitely not at per iFlow, because a common, you have multiple development going on, and if you have too many iFlows, you end up having too many Git repository. It's a bit too much to handle. It's not that you can't, but better not, because then there's an overhead.
Okay, excellent. Now there are a couple of API management questions. So one is API management is supported as well, right? Yeah, that was covered during the presentation. But
Yes.
if you can just remind us the artifacts that you can that are supported.
Yes, for API management, the current support that I have is mainly from an API proxy perspective. So because typically that's the main entrance into the API. So you have an API proxy, and then it uses the different things. It uses some API, what do you call it? API provider. It uses key value maps and all this. So the entrance point is an API proxy, and then when you sync an API proxy, the API behind it, that's provided by API by SAP, knows which are the dependent objects, and then it includes it in the content and syncs it over.
Cool. So just following the API management questions here, there's a question from Subhadeep saying, how do you use FlashPipe? How do FlashPipe open API specifications file from API proxies or events to GitLab? I'm not sure I understand this
Sorry.
question, by the way. Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand the question well, but seems like maybe how do FlashPipe interacts with open API specification files that you might end up using to create API proxies. Is there anything particular related to Open API specifications in FlashPipe?
So I think in the API proxy, you can create API specification, but I think there's an internal conversion into what SAP stores internally. So FlashPipe does not do the conversion. It just basically just downloads whatever SAP stores and then syncs it. So it may not directly handle that conversion from an API specification to an API proxy. But it just stores, extracts whatever and transfers whatever it is. The other thing about GitLab, GitLab is another CI/CD platform. So I haven't personally used it that much, but it should be able to configure a CI/CD pipeline to use FlashPipe.
Yeah, and talking about CI/CD platforms, obviously there are infrastructure as a service providers who also provide services like, for example, Azure, right? Like Azure has a DevOps
Yes.
sort of service. Now, can you integrate FlashPipe with in Azure DevOps, for example?
Yes. One in previously I've used Azure DevOps as well. So I think in my documentation on FlashPipe, it has an example for Azure, so it is possible. There no problem about that. Definitely I've used Azure DevOps. So I've mostly used Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions, but I've kind of quite like GitHub Actions, so I've kind of done most of my demos around that.
Yeah, GitHub Actions is very powerful. Like, and in the end, it has a very, very healthy ecosystem as well, right? So you can end up finding multiple like sort of community-driven extensions to incorporate in your GitHub Actions. It's very powerful.
Yeah.
So definitely, if you're an integration developer and want to adopt this, definitely learn GitHub Actions. It's important. Now you show us as part of the demo that you end up transforming to a Maven project, right? Like you added the POM files there. Now, is it mandatory to actually transform it to a Maven project to use it?
Not the Maven transformation is not necessary for FlashPipe usage. That was more to do the unit tests, develop the Groovy offline. So that's kind of like a side thing to show development of Groovy offline, which is I'm also a big advocate of, especially if you have some complex logic using the UI browser. Using the UI on the browser is not very helpful. So I do a lot of my transformation offline. So that helps you have the correct syntax, and then when you use IntelliJ IDEA, you can have syntax completion and all those. So that's mostly for Groovy development, not so much that is mandatory for FlashPipe.
Well, an IntelliJ IDE, like you can even have GitHub Copilot and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I think so. I don't have that subscription, but I think it has an extension for Copilot.
Yeah. Okay. So there are a couple of questions. Well, there's sort of a comment, or maybe I'll ask it as a question as well. But is there an architecture diagram which represents or gives you an overview, for example, of how FlashPipe is using like the GitHub platform, the Docker image, the locally installed IDE, and how they all work together? Do you have any architecture diagram like that in the repo? Maybe no.
No, but actually that's a good idea. I should probably put something.
It is a good idea.
I'll note this down. Yeah.
There you go. Thank you very much for that, Johannes. Now let's see. There are a couple of questions regarding cloud transport management. So one is, wait, I had one before this one. So is it possible to configure FlashPipe after transport is requested in the cloud integration tenant, which is using cloud transport management? So there's a use case here where it says like, I want to have approval mails triggered with a run result. Would that be possible? Something like that.
I think this FlashPipe is kind of like, how do you say, like mutually exclusive with cloud transport management, because I mean, one part of it, if you want to move it to another system, then that part is cloud transformation. No, the TMS does it, FlashPipe does it, but there are other features of FlashPipe. Let me try to think. But no, actually, I think it's maybe mutually exclusive. So I'm not sure how the use case would work. EMS with FlashPipe. I think maybe the question, because I did include some unit tests and all those, which is not really is related to CI/CD, but overall, but not really mandatory for FlashPipe. So if you want to configure CI/CD without FlashPipe, you can do unit tests and all those, and then maybe in that CI/CD set up TMS, that would be a separate use case, but may not involve FlashPipe.
Okay, perfect. So I think that you sort of answered for there are other questions related to cloud transport management, but you sort of answered them with that statement that you just made. So that's good. Let's see. There's one. I think this is a yes, but let's see. Is it possible to integrate FlashPipe in Jenkins?
Yes. So any CI/CD platform that can pull an image of Docker Hub is possible. So Jenkins is possible. I personally don't use Jenkins. It's a bit very heavy to install, and also so GitHub is just everything is on the browser. So I love that. But yeah, Jenkins, no problem. It can pull an image. Any other CI/CD platform that can pull an image, run a command line, which is the basic of all CI/CD. So it should be no problem.
There's an interesting question here about unit test cases. So are unit test cases only possible on Groovy scripts, or we can cover, for example, overall, maybe that meaning by that, like the actual integration flow?
Yeah, that's the separate non-FlashPipe related question, but I think at the moment the capability from SAP does not provide that. Although in the older version of FlashPipe, which is pre 3.0, so version 1, 2 on the one some point in version 2, I did have a capability of running simulation on FlashPipe. That unfortunately didn't use the public API. You use a private API, and it was only possible on Neo. So I know some users of FlashPipe still stick on the older version because one, they're on Neo, and also they use this simulation capability. But in CF, there's no public API for simulation yet. So in the version 3 onwards, there was no support for that.
Okay. Yeah, well, yeah, in the end, like we are empowered, but also limited by the APIs available, right?
Yes, right.
So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Like if it's not possible via an API, then it might not just be possible. But well, I think we can wrap it up for today. Just a reminder that
I do have a last
yes.
slide.
Yes.
Slide before we wrap up. So
Okay,
I just
perfect.
thought last slide. So next steps for those who are watching, like I said, FlashPipe is free, so you can try it out. And then there is a examples repository where you can check out the different use case, like just now Azure DevOps and etc. Multiple packages in the same tenant. And lastly, like my open source solutions are available for free there are some community members that support me on GitHub sponsors. So some do it regularly, some buy me ad hoc bubble tea. So if you like my solution or you use it for your own work, feel free to support me. I'll be very thankful for that. So that's all I have, Antonio, and all those who are attending today. Thank you again for listening to my session.
Excellent, excellent. So thank you very much, Eng Sui, well, for sharing your knowledge and all your expertise, right, with FlashPipe. It's a very exciting open source project. So yeah, thank you. And also, I want to thank all the viewers, for joining the live event or maybe just watching the recording later today. Now, there is plenty for everyone to learn during the TourFest, so make sure to check out all the sessions that are part of the event. We have 2 more sessions coming as part of the integration track, and the other one starts in 30 minutes. So I might see you there, I might not see you there, but yeah, thank you very much for joining, and yeah, thanks. Ciao. Excellent. So I've stopped the stream on